there wasn't a department, I would say, that didn't support us and weren't sort of cheerleaders for what we were doing at the one, which was, coming in and saying to Canada and to the City of Toronto, we're going to build the tallest building in the world, in Canada, top 20 in the world. We're going to do it with the most complex engineering ever done in Canada with an exoskeleton and a hybrid, wall system. We're going to be putting mass dampers on, which hasn't been done before, for swing and sway. We're going to be building subway connection with a path connection underground. I mean, all of these are ones, right?
Yeah.
They're first offs. Yeah. And this is going to be one of the most exclusive buildings in Canada. It'll be one of the most exclusive buildings in the world.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Library. I'm Dama Tamanawala, Sim Minocha, my co-host, and we're joined by Sam Mizrahi. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And another one of these we're filming on location at 181 Davenport, which is the showroom for the glorious one they call it, One Bloor West, the tallest building in Canada.
85 stories, over 1,000 feet. Not a very small project to take on, so we're excited to hear your thoughts on how that project evolved into what it is today.
Great.
So just to start, for a little bit of context, obviously the one is the tallest. It's going to be the tallest building in Canada, tallest project. But to rewind a little bit, what's a little bit about your history? Where did you grow up? You're an immigrant from Iran, right?
Yes.
And then, but mostly Toronto raised, or can you tell us a little bit about the backstory?
I immigrated from Iran in 1977, 2 years before the Islamic Revolution, and we moved to Toronto with my family, and I grew up in Toronto in York Mills and Bayview neighborhood, and went to the public school system through there, and basically my first entrepreneurial venture was in consumer electronics while I was still in high school, selling batteries and audio-video cassettes. So these are the days before, DVDs and so forth, blank audio cassettes.
Is that Unimax?
Unimax, yeah.
Unimax.
And those were the days of VHS tapes and Sony and Maxell and TDK and Fuji and BSF. And I started out basically with a couple of $1,000s and built the business up and ended up getting the distribution rights for Sony. And
okay, well, hold on. Just to, because we're going to get into everything, but how does that happen? So you started this in what, grade 9, 10, 11?
I was in grade 12.
Okay, grade 12.
Yeah.
And how does that business evolve? Because just get the distribution rights for Sony. What is?
We started to sell, the business just sort of blossomed and grew just from starting out with a couple of $1,000s and then building it up to, multi-millions basically in volume. We were moving millions of cassettes and I was selling them to that time, companies like Price Club. Costco wasn't around. It was called Price Club at the time. And Honest Ed's, that was downtown with Ed Mervish, and Bargain Heralds and Byway and Jean Couteau and Giant Tiger and Saint Laurent in Montreal, and to all the independent electronic stores that were really everywhere in the late 80s.
Right.
Like Yonge and Dundas, Yonge and Gerard, they had all these independent entrepreneurial electronic stores.
So as a high school student doing a B2B business model, it sounds like that must have been pretty unique. Did you find that all the senior people, obviously, they were taking you very, very seriously? What was it that made you stand out to them as someone that they wanted to work for or work with? Sorry.
It was building relationships. What I learned at a very young age was make friends before you need them, and to build rapport and build relationships and create a value system that everybody subscribed to. And part of that was to be the best at what you do. So if you're going to do anything, let's be the best at it and strive for perfection and put in the best systems, provide the best product, the best service. Right. And really any business at the end of the day, they have one common denominator between all of them, whether I was in the electronics business, the dry cleaning business, or the development business, it's taking care of your customer. So in every business is, the primary is, value system is take care of your customers, and you do that right and you do that better than, everyone else, you're going to be very successful at it. So the electronics business basically started from that, built it up to over $18 million in the early 90s, late 80s. I saw the introduction of laser discs come out, and I realized that was going to be the end of the magnetics division, which is what it was called, the blank audio video cassette market.
Right.
And I started to look at other industries that I wanted to do startups in that hadn't been modernized. There was no national brand leader. Nobody had brought technology into it. And taking what I had learned from Sony. Sony taught me about, process systems, ISO 9001 systems, which became very fundamental in all my other businesses, marketing, packaging, sales, branding, distribution, logistics. I mean, it was all, financial engineering.
Right.
I learned all from Sony and from the B2B of selling to, big box stores and retailers, and being able to figure out how to deal with receivables and payables and factoring and all sorts of other things.
Yeah, that's truly scaling, right? I mean, going from being an entrepreneur and sort of not a one-man show, but having a small team around you probably, to working with one of the largest companies that there is out there.
Correct.
Learning all those systems must have been very valuable.
And 18 million, how old are you at the time, and like how many employees are?
18 years old now, incorporated, and I had under 7 employees.
Okay.
Yeah, at
Wow.
that time.
That's fun.
And then from there, basically, did a number of startups, went into retail, and I saw that, in 1991, that the dry cleaning industry was fragmented, highly fragmented, mom and pop shops. Nobody had modernized it. Nobody had brought technology into it, environmental systems, ISO 9000. So I launched a company out of California called Dove Cleaners in 1992. Okay. So it was actually originated in Los Angeles. Okay. And I moved out to LA, and I was living in California for 7-8 years. And I started Dove out of LA in 92, and then brought it to Canada in 1994, and built that business up to 98 stores. We ended up having the commercial contracts to Metro Toronto Police Department, ambulance, EMS, all the way to TTC, along with 700 restaurants, and doing all the commercial cleaning as well. We were processing over 150,000 pieces a week in terms of garments and so forth, and built that up, took it public, took it private, and then exited out of that in 2000 and basically 7-ish, and started the development on the high rise and low rise, and basically Mizrahi Developments in 2008.
And what was the first project that you were involved with at Mizrahi Developments?
First one was building the most expensive home in Forest Hill at the time. And it was a spec build, and it was basically, I bought the lot, and this is now 2008, call it. And so you can imagine the timing there was pretty
a bit of turbulence there with
2007, 2008. So, went out to go build the best house, and to build the best house in Forest Hill in Toronto. And bought it, zoned it, got all the approvals, did all the engineering with the architects and everything, and started the construction company at the same time, which we build all of our own product. We don't ever sub it out. And started to put the ISO 9001 systems that I had at Unimax and that I had at Dove Cleaners, and brought that into the real estate construction and development world. And we were the first at that in 2008.
Okay. My immediate question, the third time you mentioned the ISO system, what is that?
It's basically...
Do you know what that is?
Yeah, so it's an international standard that basically says everything that you say you do and that you promise to do, you actually do.
Okay.
So it's really a auditing agency that comes out and audits you every year and verifies that all the great things that you tell everyone that you actually do, and that goes into the quality control systems and all the back of house and everything that you do, you actually do it.
So it's a third-party check.
Third-party
check.
Yeah. KPMG does it, SGSD.
Right.
So
and
third-party auditing firms.
And so then, like, by being audited by those guys, then I guess you have access then to the larger businesses?
Correct. And other businesses and other lenders and investors and so forth know that you have process systems in place.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're not just a people-oriented company, you have a process-oriented company.
Yes.
And that's very important for execution risk, because what you want to know is that the person you're doing business with has got a audited process system in place that you can verify and validate, and that there are systems in place. And people take a great amount of comfort knowing that you have a flight plan, you have a process,
Yeah.
and that process is independently verified and audited, and that you're adhering to it, and that tells the world when you're doing business that you can count on those systems to represent what the brand and what the quality of what you're buying.
Yeah.
And Sony taught me that, which was very important.
So bringing that lesson in from Sony into real estate, how do you apply that same so-called the verification of your processes? What processes do you use on the development side specifically, and on One Bloor? We'll go into that project a little bit more, but just how are you bringing those same lessons into development specifically?
By basically exceeding what code is, what the building code is, exceeding what I call industry practices. So we look at industry practice, we look at code, and we look at that as being the base. And then we look at how can we exceed in each department, in each level, and basically dial it up to be the best and to be a leader or innovator in that space for those specific areas. So if it's everything from concrete testing to make sure the concrete, for example, is the right MPA and poured right, and engineer sign-offs on them, all the way to customer service evaluations and being in touch with our customers, giving them surveys, learning from them what we're doing right, what we're doing not right, what we can do better, and then using that as really a mirror to continually improve the business and our process systems so that we develop better products, we develop better customer service experiences, we develop better warranty programs, we develop better engagement, basically.
And while doing that, sort of striving for the best, does that allow you to not only get the values that you're looking for on the end product side, let's say just the sales prices that you're looking for because you're building what is above and beyond what people are expecting, but also does the city look at that favorably in terms of allowing you 100%. To build something that other people would not be able to build because you're exceeding those expectations?
The One is a great example of that with the city. We had incredible what I would call City of Toronto support from planning department, from city engineers, from all the way to even there wasn't a department I would say that didn't support us and weren't sort of cheerleaders for what we were doing at the One, which was coming in and saying to Canada and to City of Toronto, we're going to build the tallest building in the world in Canada, top 20 in the world. We're going to do it with the most complex engineering ever done in Canada with an exoskeleton and a hybrid wall system. We're going to be putting mass dampers on, which hasn't been done before. For swing and sway, we're going to be building a subway connection with a path connection underground. I mean, all of these are ones, right? Yeah. They're first offs, and this is going to be one of the most exclusive buildings in Canada. It'll be one of the most exclusive buildings in the world, and they would look at it and see at that time what we had done and delivered at 133 Hazelton and 181 Davenport. And what we were doing even at 128 Hazelton, and what we were doing in Ottawa, which won awards for landmark building and design. Right. And it gave them great comfort because they saw we could execute, and they saw that we were executing, and the building spoke for themselves. The homeowners who live in the building speak for themselves. Terrion, that we work with, that does the home warranty programs for all these. We just got nominated this year for the highest award in Terrion for customer experience, customer warranty, and not having any claims. We've not had we had 0 claims with Terrion in 10 years, which is very rare. And we got nominated for the highest award by Terrion this year for that. So those recognitions, thank you,
That's awesome.
Came a lot from those systems, and I contribute that to not only the value system that we created, but the systems we created with the ISO 9000. And what the brand really is entailing, which is to achieve excellence.
Okay. Okay, we might off camera, we might have to talk more about the I got an ISO 9000, my entire business plan here. So,
it's a good plan.
So to get right into the meat and potatoes of the conversation, a little context. Obviously, I work at Colliers. Yeah. In my
we like Colliers.
Yeah,
we do business with Colliers as well.
Yeah, great Canadian company.
It is.
But within my company, a lot of the times people will say, oh, I have this assembly opportunity. Yeah. And like everybody just starts rolling their eyes. Like it's nearly impossible, right? It's the chances of it happening, right?
That's all we do.
Exactly. Right. So,
that's all we do.
And so just, can you talk about how the project got started, working with Stoleries, right? Stolery. There's a suit company, right?
Correct. Men's clothing company.
Men's clothing company, yeah. Because I remember, we're young guys. I remember
117 years old.
Yeah, okay, yeah. My mom was sending me to the sale after you guys bought them, right? Or their clearance sale. So can you talk about that experience of how you developed that relationship, acquired the property, and all the others?
It's really no different than what I was doing my whole life, which is building relationships. And every property that I ever purchased was assembled privately off market. So we actually haven't done a development to date that did not have off market private assembly done.
Yeah.
And what I do is basically look at where the city and the community really wants a redevelopment to occur, and nobody has really initiated it because the assembly that's required to become large enough to make a meaningful impact to that community just wasn't for sale.
Right.
Or it came in pieces where one would come up for sale, but it wouldn't work because you needed a much larger land massing to do it. And so you really couldn't do anything with it. And what would happen over time is these communities would grow and mature, and other developments would take place all around them, like you see at Yonge and Bloor.
Yeah.
And then you have this one store or this one area that's left undeveloped.
Right.
What I call underdeveloped. So with Yonge and Bloor, for example, the key was not just Stoleries. Stoleries was only one piece of real estate. You had to assemble all the way to the west of Stoleries and all the way south of Stoleries. So I had to deal with 14 different individuals to assemble who none of them were vendors.
Yeah.
Right? None of them were looking to sell. Nothing was, so it's not just, it wasn't just Stoleries. Stoleries was what I'd call, a very key piece in the puzzle, the key piece in the puzzle, because without the corner, the rest is irrelevant to some degree. But at the same time, they had a symbiotic relationship where if I just bought Stoleries on its own, we wouldn't be building the one.
Right.
Because Stoleries on its own was not large enough in terms of its square footage to do anything with.
How many square feet is that?
I can't remember off the top of my head. Our current assembly is 28,000 square feet.
GFA?
No, of land.
Sorry.
On not GFA. Land, GFA is over over 1 million. But the land we assembled that I put together was over 28,000 square feet. So you needed that type of massing, which involved buying the stores on Yonge Street, 760, 770, 742, all of those that went down. So I had to assemble Stoleries, but make the deal conditional upon me assembling the balance of the Yonge Street properties and the balance of the properties to the west on Bloor Street as well, which involved 13, 15, and Bloor Street West as well. So it was more than just the corner.
Right.
And none of the other properties would work without the corner, and the corner wouldn't have worked without the other properties. So there was a symbiotic relationship that was very important. And, understanding that, I went in and started to build a relationship in parallel, not only with the Stolery family and Ed Whaley, who was the partner in the store and what I would call sort of the strategic mind of the store where you bought your suits from.
Right.
And many other people did, but also all the other family members that were involved, plus all the other family members and vendors south and west at the same time.
Okay.
So it was 14 different people.
So you kind of spend a day there and just go in.
I spent many days. I spent 9 months. It took 9 months of building rapport.
So how, from that first conversation, what's the pitch?
The first conversation, he basically was very polite and threw me out of the store.
Okay.
It was very politely said to me, it's not for sale.
Thanks, no thanks.
Thanks, no thanks. And, I don't even know who you are and never heard of you.
Right.
And, this is the most important corner in Canada. And do you know how many developers come to me every day and ask me to sell this property? And I tell, and you're going to get the same answer as every other developer, which is no, I'm not interested. And I said, great, that's fine.
Yeah.
And then basically I changed it from wanting to come and see him to buy the store to wanting to come and see him to just talk about life and about the market.
Okay.
And about retail. You know, he loved retail. He loved, he's passed now. He just passed away last year.
Oh.
But in the years, you know, that I was with him, it was, you know, he loved retail. He loved to talk about the market. He loved to talk about Bloor Street. He loved to talk about, and so we engaged in meaningful conversation about, you know, just generally the market, retailing, buildings, architecture, clothing, the retail, you know, and I had experience in retail, and I knew a lot about clothing because, you know, I was cleaning 100 and millions of pieces. I knew the brands and I knew everything, and basically started to build a rapport with them over 8-9 months, and about values and about, you know, what's important for the city, what's important for the community, how the landscape's changing. And then one day, you know, I got a call from him to come and meet with him for coffee, like I normally did. And basically he told me today's the, you know, came and met with him, and he said, I'm ready, you know, I'm selling it to you. He goes, I want to sell it to you. And for him, it wasn't just about the sale. It was really about passing the torch.
Right.
Where, you know, the family, Stollery's family, you know, we're the second owner in the history of that location on land titles. It was Her Majesty the Queen.
Right.
Then it was the Stollery family for 14 to 117 years, something like that. And then we were the second. Like, there was only two names on the land.
Yeah,
where normally
Crown,
you look at you know, land transfer titles and there's, you know, multiple names. So for him, it was really, you know, it's a legacy, and it's a matter of, you know, passing it to someone who's going to be the custodian of that and to take care of that in the same value system that he held it up to. And he knew, and when I asked him, I said, you know, really what it was for him is not to have no compromises, to do something great and not to compromise on those values. And that's what we delivered on.
That's what you specialize in.
That's what we specialize in. So it was a very easy promise to deliver on for us.
Mm-hmm. And so when you had the owners agree to sell you the different parcels, let's say the 13 or 15 different spaces, were you also tying in the approval process at that time, like having an extended closing to take it through the zoning process? And go ahead if you have any other questions, Dana.
Sorry, how do you, like, that is, getting one person is like, yeah, okay.
14.
Yeah, no, but I mean, like, getting Ed to
agree.
get on board and, you know, building a relationship with him. How do you get all the other people? And once he eventually gives you the nod, which I can imagine.
His blessing, I call it.
Right, his blessing. Yeah. I can imagine you trying not to be like celebrating too hard as that's happening.
I wasn't celebrating too hard. I was celebrating the moment because it was a key moment in everything that we see today.
Right.
But I still was very
the project is
realistic, because I realized now my real work began.
Right.
Because I had to now get all the other landowners to also agree to sell.
Right.
And which I was, you know, nurturing and building those relationships and those conversations over the months. But, you know, nobody believed that Ed was, or the Stollery family was a vendor. So those conversations, you know, even when I went to them and I said, you know, I have the corner, they didn't believe me. Right. Because they're like, no, we've heard that before. So they actually picked up the phone and called the family and Ed Whaley and said, you know, this guy, Sam Mizrahi.
Who's this guy?
Right. Who's this guy? And he's, you know, he's saying that he's got it. And, you know, is it true? And Ed said, yes.
Wow.
And that was the main, you know, game changer.
And so, and then how do you get those guys to also give their blessing? Because as soon as they hear that one domino's gone, they say, oh, but now mine's the key piece.
Correct.
So,
and we did have to deal with a lot of what I would say, other people saying, it's the key piece and you can't do it without me. And you get into all of those types of emotions and all of those. But at the end of the day, you know, a lot of people do the right thing. And everybody understood how important this was for the city and how important this was for the country and how important this was for what we wanted to develop. And I was sharing with them my vision for the site and what we wanted to do. And you know, they were part of that vision over months. And so everyone became what I would say emotionally invested.
Right. In the success of
the project. Because behind the scenes, they were really cheerleaders and they wanted to see this. So they're really part of this legacy and they're part of the one and what we're building and what will come to be, because without them, it wouldn't be possible. As the old saying goes, it takes more than one person to put a man on the moon.
Right.
And it's really one of those stories where it's true. And every one of those vendors is part of the fabric. I consider every one of them as important as Ed Whaley and the Stories family, because any one of them could have said no.
Right.
And at that point, we wouldn't be here today talking about it.
How do you, and last question before we move on to the actual project itself, how do you expedite that process from, obviously their conversations with Ed helped, but how do you say, okay, look, we're going to move forward with this? Because you have a contract with Ed, right?
Correct.
You got to deal within that timeline. So are you saying, what, we have enough people to the west, we have a good enough floor plate, we can build up right now?
The floor plate was actually bigger, and we had people that didn't come on board. So, my floor plate was actually bigger than what the ones is today. It was actually to go much further than that. And we just couldn't get it done in time, or we ran into other challenges at the time. And everything from, timing of getting everybody closed, timing of getting everybody to agree for the closing, to pricing, to expectations. And we now had enough what I call critical mass that and velocity in terms of everything that we were doing, where we just said, okay, we're going to cut it off. We got enough of a site. It's big enough. It's going to work. It's going to be able to do what we want to achieve. And let's just execute it now.
Right.
And those who are on board are on board, and those who aren't on board, but we'll design and make the building engineered so that in the future, if they want to come on board to the south or the west, we can incorporate them into the development.
Interesting.
So I was forward thinking. And if you look at the designs of the building today, now that I sort of share this with you, you can see how the building can expand both south and west and integrate those assemblies in the future if, the stars align for it.
Huh. Okay. So let's just get right into it then. So the day that you execute the contract and you close, what happens next? There's
amazing celebration, because that was a very good day. That was October 20th, 2014.
Okay.
And I remember that day because it was very key for me. And I knew that was going to be the start of something amazing and really, again, the beginning of a lot of hard work.
Right.
Which is, now you own the site, you have it, and now the real responsibilities are coming down, which is we got to get the zoning, we got to get the site plan approvals, we have to have the consensus of the community, the buildings department, ratepayers association, the community associations, the neighbors, really, everyone.
Right.
And
total price tag, by the way, for context of the land
at that time, $227 million.
Okay.
Which at that time, everyone, was, that was one of the highest prices ever paid in Canada.
Right.
And it was, worth every penny, because there's only one Bloor Street West. Mm-hmm. And to assemble that type of massing, you just couldn't do it. It just, you look at the other four corners, the other three corners, you can't do any, like those are done. Mm-hmm. Right. So this is the last of its kind.
Right.
And so we closed on it and then really went to work, which was to do the leasing, do the zoning, do the engineering, do the architecture, work with all the stakeholders, and have the building evolve to be really the voice of the city of Toronto, because it wasn't my building. It was really the city and the country's building, and what you see. And the building went through many different variations until we got to the final design, because we had working group meetings with the councillor and stakeholders, and we were listening to what the community wanted, and we engineered that into the building, both in terms of architecture, heritage, all sorts of things. And we went through challenges where, when we first took down Stollery's, there was a lot of controversy with that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And not everybody was very happy with me, with what we did. And
a lot of negative press.
Press at that time.
And
oh yeah. And, my head went on like it was, but, to me, I think anytime anyone does something that is
meaningful,
you're going to get that type of impact and that type of what I'd say, you're going to go through those types of challenges.
Right.
Because I think it's what I call the rite of passage. You're going to go through that, and we understood it. I understood it, and we complied with everything, and which is why you even see now there's still a heritage building on the site that we didn't, which is now incorporated into it. Actually, the whole building, not just the wall. It's
a full building.
There that's going to be incorporated in, and we again listened.
The one on the southwest corner.
On the south of Bloor, on the west side of Yonge.
Yeah.
And we accommodated heritage, and we accommodated what everybody's concerns were. And so all of it wasn't without challenges. It was. And you know what? When I look back, actually, I think back of sort of the dots connecting and what we went through. And actually, we got a better building out of it. So all of even the hardships and the challenges that went through it and the evolution, I look at it as actually a blessing in disguise, because it actually made us have to work harder at creating a better building.
Right.
With the constraints. So there's nothing, I think constraints and boundaries bring out the best creativity.
Right.
When you actually don't have any restraints and you don't have any boundaries, I think that's actually more, difficult.
Was the original plan to actually build it out the way that, in terms of building, call it the center portion first and expanding out with the exoskeleton there? Was that the original plan when you had, or was that something that evolved with the different constraints?
So
when you walk us through
the exoskeleton?
The exoskeleton. Walk us through how it's actually being built.
Okay. And why the exoskeleton?
And why that approach is being done.
The exoskeleton came from really one thing. It was I wanted to build what I called uncontaminated retail space. Uncontaminated retail space, by my definition, is to have no columns, no pillars in the space, so that you can the tenant can basically create a customer experience with a magic wand to be able to do whatever they want for their brand experience and for the pedestrian experience on Yonge and Bloor, with having sight lines and visibilities without having a column or a pillar that's structural in the way of that sight line. So you basically have, you have a blue sky that you can basically do anything you want with.
Right.
And nobody had created that in Canada. It just didn't exist, especially on our high street, which is Bloor Street.
Right.
And if you go to cities like New York on Fifth Avenue, you go to Michigan Avenue in Chicago, or you go to, Ginza in Japan, or Knightsbridge, or any city around the world, Hong Kong, you have all these super flagship stores that are there. Right. Toronto never had that. Like we never had one store on the retail that was a super flag the way the Fifth Avenue did, or Michigan Avenue does, with multi-story, and and when I went to the retailers and I asked them, why, and they said, well, nobody here has the space. Nobody's created this type of space. So I said, well, what's the space that you would want? And they said, well, we want to have space with no columns and no pillars. And like, I know that's like impossible. And I'm like, it isn't. Like, if that's what you want, we'll create it.
Yeah.
And so when I went and met
just sign this lease.
Exactly. Yeah, it's actually, I mean, our anchor tenant was like that. And basically the anchor tenant said, if you can create the space, we'll sign the lease.
Right.
Have you guys, I know you guys have made that sort of, a lot of people in the space know who the anchor tenant is, but has it been publicly announced yet?
No, not yet. The anchor tenant is going to publicly announce it. We are going to be making announcements very shortly, because the building's fully leased now.
Okay.
So it's and we're going to put those out this year.
Great.
But to your point, the anchor tenant, we actually reversed engineered the building with them, and they believed it was possible, and I believed it was possible, and my architect believed it was possible, and so I was choosing an architect, and I interviewed many architects, and I wanted an architect that would understand the fabric of the country, not just the city,
right?
But because this is much bigger than Toronto, and I wanted an architect who never looked at a problem and said it can't be done. I wanted somebody who looked at every problem and looked at how it could be done, rather than saying no, it's not possible, which is what everybody says.
Right.
So when I met him, I actually met him in Europe, and Norman Foster is one of the greatest architects in the world, And at first, he actually selects, he's at a point where they select which projects they want to do, because it's not just us saying we want him. He has to also say,
I want you.
We want you.
Yeah.
And
dance.
Yeah. And basically, I said, do you want to come and build the tallest building in Canada? Do you want to come and build the most meaningful building in Canada? Do you want to come and build something that's going to be a legacy in Canada?
Right.
And we need to do something that nobody else has done, which is to build this uncontaminated retail space and rechange and reformat the entire landscape of high street retail on Bloor.
Yeah.
And that Foster and Partners took that challenge on, and basically they designed something that was able to articulate the craft and the art that we wanted to explore, because the buildings I develop is really my art. So the way I sort of express my art is not on canvas or sculpture, or I do it in the architecture and the developments that we do. So that's how I express it. And he was able to take the vision of what I wanted to do there and articulate it, engineer it, and to make it work. And the only way we could make it work is Exoskeleton. Because if you're not going to have any columns or pillars on the inside of the building that holds the whole building up, that has to go on the outside.
Right.
And so he came up with this ingenious idea, and I didn't know what exoskeleton meant.
Right.
When he first told me this,
Yeah.
I was like, what does that mean? I didn't even understand it. And then he said, we're going to put the structure that holds everything outside, and you'll get what you want. And remember, this is on top of holding an 85-story building, on top of the retail.
How deep do you got to go to do that?
143 feet.
Oh my God.
So if you go and look
is
at
that the
Yonge,
deepest dig? It must be the deepest dig.
I mean, it's mining.
Yeah, that's.
So the technology that we're using is actually mining, because you're 143 feet down to bedrock. So the pillars and the mega columns go all the way down to bedrock. So you got to support a 300 and plus meter building. Plus you have the subway.
Right.
Plus you have a concourse, and now you got to hold an 85-story building on top of retail space that has no columns or pillars.
Yeah.
So it's.
What sort of things would people not traditionally think about with a project like that? Like digging over 100 feet deep. What is it getting hot down there? Or
no, well, the soils are. I mean, it's funny, when we were drilling in the wintertime, you could see the steam coming out because the earth is warm, and as you go deeper, the warmer the soils and the earth is. So we would dig, and we would be going down 143, and when the shoring rigs and the piling and all of our augers were coming back up, you could see the steam rising from the earth. Wow. It's an amazing thing to see. There's so many things. I mean, it's innovation. It's doing something that hasn't been done before, and putting together the best team to do it. So we went after, and I sort of went, and I sort of always consider myself more like as a conductor.
Right.
I don't know how to play the violin, but I'm going to bring in the best violinist.
Right. And
I know what it should sound like, and I know how it should play in concert with everyone else. So we're going to go bring the best violinist, the best celloist, the best percussionist, and we're going to make it work in concert. And so I went out and got the best structural engineer, the best, acoustic engineers, the best soil engineers, the best of everyone, where everybody was really a Wayne Gretzky in their world. And everybody was the one in their sector. And when you get that, you get passion. So people aren't just there because of the job, they're passionate about what they do, which is why they're the ones in their industry. If you look at Steve Jobs, for example, he's passionate about what he does, which is why Apple is what it is.
Right.
And
It's reflected throughout
it's reflected through everything.
And their standards are
correct.
They're in line with your standards,
Correct.
right? Which is
build the best
top-notch,
product
be
in
the
the
best,
world and change the world and to do something different. And so we looked at that and said we're going to bring in the best people. And so we put together, I would say, the best construction team, one of the best construction teams in Canada, and executed it. And we go down to 143 feet. We got mining technology that's going in there. We've got innovation that's been the first of its kind in Canada being done. For
instance,
well, we've got. If you look at even our construction offices that we built on Bloor and Yonge,
right,
the sea cans and the sea containers, it's never been done in Canada before like that. We brought that innovation in and did
now
it.
I feel like you see more of it.
Right.
Too.
Well, after we did it.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
Which is great. I'm happy with that because it inspires people to think differently.
Yeah.
And so we did that because of the size of the site. You're at Yonge and Bloor. You don't have, you know, a lot of space. You got over 400,000 people that go through that intersection every 24 hours. It's the highest visibility site, and you got to build the tallest building, and you got to operate, and how you're going to, you know, where you're going to put, you know, construction site equipment, offices, and there's a lot of people that go into building this building.
Right.
And
So-
there's only so many Mizrahi pylons you can put outside.
Exactly. And so, so we came up with this, you know, concept of using the sea containers, converting them into offices, and piling them on top of each other like Lego, where they take up, you know, 15 feet.
Yeah, it's
And-
awesome.
That's
And it
cool.
works, all right?
And
So-
they play music.
and they play, yeah, and we put the
Yeah.
music in to
Yeah.
create more of an atmosphere, so it's nice. That's when we also have the tall, you know, we have the biggest crane in Canada that's ever been erected, which is in
The one that's up there right now,
it's
yeah.
Yonge and Bloor.
Yeah.
There was a lot of press on that as well. That came out of Urban Toronto, covered that, and really, I would say 75% of what we're doing there is a really first of its kind in terms
Right.
of equipment, in terms of engineering. I mean, Liebherr had to bring that in from Germany. So it was the first, you know, they built it and they actually brought it in overseas
Wow.
because nobody has it.
Can you speak to the building out strategy that Sim had mentioned earlier?
Sure. In terms of building out from,
Like so now you're seeing it at CIBC Tower down on front, right?
Yeah.
Like it looks like they're just building up the elevator, and I remember seeing that building for the first time and saying, well, I thought it was going to be a lot bigger than that, but obviously it is. So like, how does that process work, and why is it different?
we're using a jump system to build it out.
Okay.
And so the jump system is different than the traditional systems of how buildings are formed, where you're doing it in modules. We're doing also a lot of things off-site and assembling off-site and then bringing them and then putting them down, you know, building it almost like Lego, where it builds up. And the jump system comes in modules where you're using the elevator shaft systems and the elevators to jump the building up. Rather than traditional fly forms of what you saw before. This allows you to build the building much quicker. It's more efficient. It's safer. And also you have to keep in mind when you're building out a building like this, when you're going, you know, at 85 stories, and our 85 stories is more like 115 stories, 100 stories,
Because of the
because of
retail.
our retail heights and the
Yeah,
heights
how
of
high
each.
is the clear height for the retail right now?
It's 34 feet.
Oof,
And
wow.
remember, we have 18 floors of retail, right? So our residential floor starts at 19. Our retail goes to 18 because we have our anchor tenant, which takes up the ground floor and the concourse. They're on 2 floors. And then we have, you know, 2 floors of hospitality restaurants that are going in that are international and event space as well. And then we have a hotel, which is 11 floors, which will be 165 to 185 room hotel as well. So it's really 18 floors, and then the 19th
then the
floor is the rest.
residence.
But
Right.
to go back to this, what I was getting at with the jump system is that it allows you to basically efficiently build, but more importantly, when you start to get up to 60 stories, 70 stories, 80 stories, the wind and becomes a major factor, and weather and so forth. It's not like you're at 12 stories. So we're able to wrap the building in these modules to protect everyone inside from the wind
Oh.
at 80 stories and 70 stories that are working.
Like, so somebody's not just going to be blown off
Correct.
the side of the
or,
building.
or not to have any materials move.
Right.
And also with the weather and climate systems we have in Canada, you know, I would argue 6-7 months of the year, you've got, you know, weather that's not ideal for construction,
Right.
Just got to learn what to do with that, right? Turn that weakness into strength. And the way we did it is to put a wrap around the building in these jump system modules, so it protects not only the workers, but protects the environment inside where it's heated, nothing can move. If it's snowing or freezing rain outside and it's minus 20, nobody will know.
Right.
Inside, right? It's a cocoon, and that cocoon moves up the building in, you know, 10-story increments at a time. So.
And just obviously since 2014, it's been what, five years now, right? So 5 years since then, and it's going to be a few more years now before the residential components opened up, probably, right? So construction costs have skyrocketed
Yeah.
in a lot of ways, but as have a lot of the condo prices since that
Correct.
time. So do you think that that's been a positive thing for you, the fact that the prices have sort of gone up, or do you think that the condo construction cost increase has sort of
Well, no, the
counted that?
construction costs have gone up across all of Canada.
Across
So
the board.
we were very cognizant of that. And because we build our own buildings and we're the GC on our buildings, we saw that coming in a lot of it. And we were sort of on the front lines of seeing these pricing change from the subcontractors. And it had to do with just supply demand and the fact that, you know, Toronto has got more construction cranes than any other city in North America.
Right.
So we're very lucky. We're very blessed and grateful to the fact that our economy is doing so great, especially in the real estate. But what that does is it puts a lot of pressure on the number of trades that you have available, and you don't have enough, basically, subcontractors to provide the supply to the demand that's being done.
Right.
So pricing raised, you know, the pricing went up, labor went up, cost of materials went up, steel went up, glass went up, everything, and it's just supply demand concerns. So we saw that, and when we were developing the one and putting in the pricing structures and so forth, we were able to understand what our true costs were prior to launching, and then being able to augment those costs into our structures to make sure that we had a viable project, and one that, you know, we wouldn't get into and then, you know, find out that it was not viable and have to cancel the project
Right.
before construction.
Like we're
some of
seeing.
the-
Like we're seeing, right?
4,000 units last year
right.
in
And
2018.
even one last week that can't
the
cancel.
one in Brampton there.
So, and the reason is that they pre-sold the building, and then they came to do the construction contracts,
Right.
And
Haven't
you've
locked
wor- and
in
you've got a
anything.
fixed-
locked it. Yeah.
and you got a fixed revenue.
Yeah.
Right.
so you can't move.
so
Yeah.
We didn't. We did it the other way around.
So do you have an
Yeah.
adaptive pre-sale strategy then that's sort of in line with, or did you have an adaptive pre-sale
Well, we didn't
strategy
pre-sell
at
the
that-
building. We actually didn't.
That point.
So we've now sold 77%
right?
of
Yeah.
the building, and we did that all in the last 16 months. So it's actually 14 months. So we didn't go to pre-sales until basically 2018.
And you actually must have pre-leased the.
And,
some
no,
of the
and we were
retails
100% leased
I was
before.
going to say the retail must
So-
have all been pre-leased from what
Correct.
my understanding is prior to that, right?
So the leasing, we knew where we
That's
were
the
at.
opposite of most developers.
Correct. Most developers
Don't
don't
even
do the
They
leasing.
don't even do the leasing oftentimes. So.
For us, for me, the strategy was to get the retail leasing done first, because I thought that was the most strategically, it was the most important, especially with our anchor tenant
And that location.
and that location.
Yonge and Bloor.
And retail is one of the hardest, in my opinion, in terms of putting in the right tenant to the right store to the right location, right rental rate, everything. You know, all the stars have to align perfectly. So to me, it was more important for me to get the retail right, because if the retail we got perfectly right, which we did, the rest of it will take care of itself. I never had any doubt about the residential condominium market in Toronto because it's so strong.
Right.
And to come out early and to pre-sell the residential, to me, didn't make sense because the building was evolving, and we were evolving based on the retail tenants. So for me to have a final product, it was based on where we were on the retail, evolve the residential to become the most current form of it, find out really what the residential customer wants. You know, let the customer tell you what they want, and start to reverse engineer the residential to mirror what the customer wants. So we spent 3.5 years listening to the customer,
Right.
the residential customer, the same way that we listen to the retail customer. And that timeline of us learning about what the customer wanted, everybody won. It was a win-win scenario. The customer won because the homeowner, which I'm referring to the customer in this thing, but the homeowner basically got to design the building they want to live in. We won because we were able to deliver that promise to them, and the pricing in terms of our investors and everyone else of knowing how to structure that and what the costing will be based on when we launched. We had essentially the building under construction. So we didn't go to the pre-sales. We didn't do the pre-sales before we started, until after we started construction. We started construction in June of 2017, and we went into the pre-sales for the residential in 2018.
Wow.
So we knew what our costs were. before we launched.
So that's why it's okay. So that's why it's such a different project. So and then
I mean, everything we did backwards, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I'm surprised,
Yeah.
and
We
to
didn't-
think about it with a project of that magnitude, right? From a financing standpoint, construction lenders, I mean, they want to see that you're at 75% pre-sale before you can start digging or anything.
You're
else like
100%.
that.
Our construction lenders didn't require that
Yeah.
because they knew, well, number one, the retail really paid for the project.
Yeah, that's
in essence, right? In a lot of ways. And our lenders, specifically our construction lenders, and I would say all of our lenders, not even our construction lenders, all of our lenders, had complete confidence that we were going to execute the residential.
right.
There was never any doubt in their mind. So they knew the residential. They had very good confidence with that. But to risk mitigate, we had the retail.
Is there? Sorry, we might have to edit this out. But are you able to share the rates of because like Bloor
Well,
is just I get blown away of the rates. Is
the
that?
rental rates, you mean? Or the
Yeah, I
Okay,
mean
so
retail
the rental
rates.
rates?
They're the highest rates in Canada.
Okay.
So whatever you think is, what I would tell you that whatever retail rental rates that you've seen in the past, historically,
Right.
they're higher than those by a very big margin.
Above or
and-
below 400.
Above.
Okay. All right. Well,
All right. I would love to go a bit more into the financing.
But there's
idea.
only one Bloor Street West, and there's only
Yeah.
one building with no columns and pillars, and
yeah.
right. So you pay for what you get.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
No.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about the process of capital structuring on a building like that, even at the land acquisition stage.
You can't do it in one shot. It's piece. You have multiple
I
people.
was gonna say, and
It's too big.
syndication. It's
It's
way
too
too
big.
big. I mean,
I mean,
we're doing
look,
a big project.
The
and-
maximum limits in Canada for a bank is 100 million
Yeah.
out of Sked A.
Yep.
So on a project over $1 billion, which the one is, you would need 11 banks. Sked, you need 11 banks at 100
There-
million.
Is there 11 Sked AVs
We don't
out
have
there?
it,
Yeah, I was
right?
gonna say, it
So
doesn't exist.
it's not a Canadian bank deal. It's too large. It's too big, and it required very different financial engineering to do it, which was to basically do it in multiple pieces and to do it in phases in order to be able to pool it together. It's too big for one. So we did it in multiple pieces. And so we have, many lenders on it, and they're all in different positions, and that's just what it took to do it, because it's just too big to do it with one lender. You just can't do it.
Right.
So there's many different components in it. 200 million here, 12 million, another 200 million, another 300 million, and then you add it all up, and you have over $1 billion. But you just can't do it with what I would say conventional construction finance. I mean, there's nothing conventional about this building.
No.
Yeah.
Right. So neither will the financing be. The financing is as sophisticated as the building's engineering. It's just, again, not been done before in Canada, and everybody was very, and a lot of people didn't think we were going to be able to do it because nobody had built a building in one tower that was over $1 billion.
Right.
You've done it over multiple towers, over
Different
phases,
yeah.
but not in one building in one tower. So we really, in a lot of cases, we became the largest pieces in a lot of people's portfolios because we were, really maxing out in every area, and a lot of lenders wanted to be part of it because of the fact that they were part of something that they saw was going to be very iconic and very important, and they wanted to help,
Right.
and to make the vision happen. So we ended up getting lenders who really came, who wanted to see this project be successful, and every lender that we brought in were very sophisticated. You can imagine at this level and this size,
Right.
and they knew the constraints, and they knew the limitations we'd be facing, and so they wanted to
Like
figure out.
financially, like
Yeah, in
how
terms
the
of
bank-
constraints
okay.
of how banking system works and how
Right.
max syndications work and how max limits work, and so they were helping us to engineer how to do this,
Right.
because they wanted to see this happen, and it was a win-win scenario because all of our interests were aligned, right? Which was to see the successful completion of the building, and knowing what the limitations are, again, creates that creativity to figure out, okay, let's figure out how to do it, and let's figure out how to do it together. And I was very, very blessed and very grateful that we had lenders that came in that were there to support the vision and to take it, and every one of them played a very key role in specific times to have the project go forward. And lenders that came in at the beginning were very important because they were there, before we had the leasing done, before we had the pre-sales done, and then we had lenders that came in at different times. So every one of them played a very significant role.
And it's all being done under, I guess, different commitment letters. And if it's that,
Different-
which is strange, because usually
multiple.
like a lead lender would be like, even with a syndicate, you'll see like an A/B structure where you get a couple lenders together, or even more lenders.
We
together.
have an A piece, a B piece, a C piece, D piece. We've got multiple letters in the first 4 or 5 letters of the alphabet in our pieces. But yeah, for sure.
And then in terms of construction draws, though, I guess with typically you got one group that's handling paying that out. But if you're getting it from multiple sources in different,
No, it's one group.
lead.
It's one lead. Yeah, it's one lead.
It's
that
one
handles
lead?
it.
Okay.
Yeah, that
Great,
runs it.
great.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I was gonna say
And that's the government of China. Like they came in. And that was one of the big lenders. It was sovereign, basically, because at this level, you're dealing with basically state-owned enterprise, and the construction lender.
So it's
came
Bank
in.
of China, you said? Or?
It's the government of China.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not the bank; it's the actual government.
Okay, that's what I said.
It's a state-owned enterprise.
I've never seen that.
I mean, this stuff's public because it's
they're
registered
we're
on
just
title.
discussing
Yeah,
this.
right.
Yeah.
But and
That's cool.
And again, along with many other lenders in there, but yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I was just wondering, like, is it credit union groups that are in there? Is it banks? Is it foreign lenders? What is it? How does it work?
You get into basically at this level insurance companies, and life co companies. Well, insurance companies, REITs that were in there, public companies that are
funds,
in here,
funds are in there.
and governments.
Is this you that's going around? Like
Yes.
I'm picturing,
Yes.
Bobby Axelrod stepping into
I don't know if I use
each boardroom, and
Well, it's Sam Mizrahi going into the boardroom. So
exactly,
and
yeah.
doing it, and basically
awesome.
raise the financing that way.
Okay, I'm excited in my career and Sim's career. We're gonna have some billion-dollar projects. We're gonna say,
Amen.
okay, we're gonna. I know a guy who can help us.
I had a
with
chance
this.
to work on one of them, and it was an awesome experience. We did it with a foreign lender as well, but it's impossible to do it with Canadian lenders, as you said there.
Well, it's not to say that it's impossible. It's just
big.
it's. I think when you do something like this, it forces change, and we were pioneering it, and I think what it'll do, it'll inspire to have these types of resources available for these types of projects, and to allow entrepreneurs to be able to execute them.
Right, and
like you see it in the U.S. all the time, and you see it around the world globally, right? So why can't we do it here in Canada?
Right.
It's just it wasn't done before, so we came out and we're doing it, and I believe that it's going to inspire and make change to allow for these institutions to be able to do it, and before they didn't do it because nobody had done it before.
right.
Yeah. Well, there's so many firsts that
Right.
that
And everybody tells you it can't be done, right? Until somebody does it. And then after you do it,
So, look at how it's done already. Yeah.
So
We gotta.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up here in a sec. I just wanted to ask a couple quick ones more. I mean, this project with all the firsts that are happening to it, it's really elevating sort of Toronto to being in that London, New York category.
absolutely.
So do you think that that right now Toronto is already in that stage and in that, and do you think that there's any other projects that you see coming about that will help elevate us into that category?
I think we are now 100% broken the ice to have Canada be on the international map in terms of architecture. We did that many years ago with the CN Tower.
Right.
CN Tower, today, even forget about its time, is an architectural masterpiece in terms of landscape architecture. You look at it in the cityscape. So I think, Toronto and Canada had already done that, decades ago. And I think this is now, again, sort of like a second wind coming back out to have those types of aspirational architectural cityscape, landscape architecture come back up, like the one and many others that'll come up. You look at, a lot of developments across Canada, and I think it's just going to inspire to do more of it. And that's what I hoped for with After the One, is that I hope that we see more buildings like this where you're raising the, the bar and wanting to achieve, to do things that we hadn't done before, and to really push our limits, and to create something that's going to make a really positive impact for not only the community and city of whichever developer is doing it, but for the entire country, and to have it compete on an international level in terms of what we've done, and I think we're well underway.
Yeah. Should I close it out? I just want to be
we want to be
your
respectful
time.
of your time here.
Whatever you like.
So.
I'm having fun, so
Yeah. So 416 units you have.
you know that was on purpose, right?
Yes.
It's the area code of Toronto.
Hey. Oh, really?
416.
Oh, really? I don't know.
Yeah.
416.
I like that.
416, the 6.
So you have I guess around 100 units left or so, just around.
We've just under 100 units now.
just under 100. Okay, so go out and buy them.
Yeah, if they're anything like this showroom,
Well, there's no more.
I'll be buying.
Yeah, I mean, there's no more.
But,
Like, I can't replicate this again, right? So it's really one of a kind.
Right. The one.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is. Should I do the final question, or did you have one more?
I could keep doing this for an hour, and I don't
Okay.
think we want to do it for another hour here. Just
Okay.
Sam's gonna kill me. So
Yeah.
why don't we get to it?
So really exciting, and we appreciate you being here. This is our final question. It's called the 3 truths.
Yeah.
So imagine years from now, you live to be 150 years old and very long and successful. Even the things that you have on that would eclipse even this project, right? Everything is you achieve everything that you've ever wanted to do. And but for whatever reason, it's your last day and your entire family is around you, your kids, your grandkids.
So for some reason, you're surrounded by all your family, and for some reason, all the content that you've ever put out, including interviews, podcast discussions, any piece of content, it's all gone.
Yes.
And you have one last thing to say, and it's 3 things actually, specifically to your loved ones about whether it be advice on how you should live your life, what they should be looking for, and what they should be doing. It's called the 3 truths.
Yeah, three kind of principles that you live by.
So what would you can take a second there to think about it, but what would you say those 3 truths or principles that you would want your family, friends, etc. to hear?
I would say it's interesting. Nobody's ever asked me that. I would say the first one would be what you would want, and what's most important to me is make sure that every single person that comes into contact with you comes away being better off than they were before. Don't ever have anybody you never want somebody to come into contact with you or your brand or your company and to say they were worse off than before. I would say my own personal value system that I would tell and teach my children are have every single person that comes into contact with you feel that they were better off knowing you than they were before. And if you have that as your moral compass, you're always going to make the right choices, or you should generally make the right choices and have that as a guiding principle. I would say the second one, that's a very fundamental one for me, is not to ever give up on your dreams. And, most people fail in whatever, anytime I failed at something, if I gave up on it. And so I think resiliency and if you really, are passionately have a dream and, don't give up on it and execute it, because that's, why we're here, right? That's the way I believe why we're here is to actually execute and live our dreams. Right? Yeah. This is the heaven, right? So, and I think, on a third one, it's really put your partners first. And partners are everyone from your wife, your children, financial partners, business partners, life partners. I think anytime if you put, even customers, anybody, put the person you're dealing with first. And I think when you do that, really magical things happen. And generally, again, that value system brings out the best in people. And when you put others first, they'll put you first, generally.
Right.
And so
it's reciprocal.
Yeah. And it always takes one person to do it and to start that. And most people are fearful of doing that. But when you do, and you put your partner's interests first, you can achieve, I think, greatness.
Awesome.
That was a damn good answer.
Yeah, we certainly feel better off for having had this conversation with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It was fun.
Good luck with the rest of the project.
If there's anything that you'd like, links or anything that you want people to reach out to you on, let's say it's they're looking to buy something, we'll put the information below just so that they can get information on the one and on any other projects that you're working on. Yeah,
it'd be a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks,
Sam.